The Golden State Warriors faced a frustrating night in Indiana, one that left players and coaches alike searching for answers. Their 114-109 defeat against the Pacers wasn't just another regular season stumble. It was the kind of loss that sticks in a team's memory. Holding a comfortable 11-point advantage deep into the fourth quarter, Golden State appeared to have the game under control. But what followed was a collapse, a 21-5 run by Indiana that flipped the outcome completely. With that, the Warriors dropped to a 4-3 record, and the lingering question became how such an experienced team allowed another winnable game to slip away so late. Stephen Curry, the undisputed heart of the Warriors, once again found himself under the post-game spotlight. Despite leading the team in scoring with 24 points, his shooting night was below par, converting just 34.8% of his attempts. But rather than deflecting blame or offering excuses, Curry faced the disappointment head-on. He admitted that during key stretches, his own decisions may have hurt the team's offensive rhythm. It was a moment of leadership, the kind of accountability fans and teammates expect from the franchise's cornerstone. Curry's tone was calm but firm, a recognition that while basketball is a team game, leadership often means owning your role in defeat as much as in victory. Head coach Steve Kerr echoed that sentiment, speaking candidly about the team's shortcomings. He refused to let fatigue or scheduling be an excuse. In his eyes, the loss came down to something much simpler, a failure to execute when it mattered most. There are always tough nights during a long season, Kerr said, visibly disappointed. But this shouldn't have been one of them. We had rest, we had energy, and yet the way we closed was unacceptable. He made sure to credit the effort of the younger players, noting that they played their hearts out, but it was clear that execution, not effort, was the difference between a win and another frustrating loss. For a veteran squad that prides itself on poise and precision, the message from both Curry and Kerr was unmistakable. Focus and discipline need to return, immediately. Experience means little if a team can't close games. Every possession matters, every defensive rotation counts, and every mental lapse can turn a sure victory into another lesson in frustration. The Warriors, a franchise built on the principles of ball movement and awareness, seemed to lose touch with their identity during those crucial final minutes. For Curry, that realization was more than a critique. It was a personal mission statement. "We've got to be sharper," he said. "And that starts with me." Curry's approach to problem-solving on the court has always been methodical. His mental checklist is something like an internal flowchart. If there's an open teammate, deliver the ball early. If not, push the pace up the middle. If no defender steps up, attack the rim. And if there's any daylight beyond the arc, let it fly. It's that quick, layered decision-making that has made him one of the most unpredictable offensive weapons in NBA history. But against the Pacers, that rhythm never fully clicked. Whether it was mistimed passes, missed looks, or defensive breakdowns, the Warriors looked like a team still struggling to find cohesion in moments that demand instinctive trust. Longtime assistant coach Bruce Fraser once said that when Curry gets into a groove, it's like watching controlled chaos. He thrives on speed, movement, and angles that most defenders can't anticipate. As player development coach Jama Malalila later added, "When Steph comes off a drag or weaves through bigs with their backs turned, it's almost impossible to guard. By the time defenders react, he's already where he wants to be." Yet, against Indiana, that flow was missing. The Pacers' defense forced Golden State into slower, predictable possessions, and when the pace slows, the Warriors' advantage fades. Even as the team searched for answers, the night wasn't entirely without its moments of intrigue. One of the younger guards, Brandon Podziemski, offered a glimpse into his personality during a recent interview. In a light-hearted moment, he jokingly compared his potential to baseball's two-way superstar, Shohei Ohtani. "I think I could be the white Shohei," Podziemski said with a grin. "Maybe not at his level, but I think I could do both. Pitch, play the field, hit, all of it." It was a reminder that amid the tension of a loss, the Warriors still have young voices confident in their abilities and eager to grow into bigger roles. Podziemski's confidence wasn't born overnight. His father once shared stories of his son's competitiveness as a child. When Brandon was young, he would challenge his dad, catching blistering fastballs and still daring him to throw harder. That fiery personality hasn't changed. It's that edge that Kerr hopes can ignite the next generation of Warriors players. Those who must learn how to play with the same urgency and awareness that once defined Golden State's dynasty years. Meanwhile, around the league, conversations about accountability aren't limited to Golden State. Memphis guard Ja Morant recently offered a revealing comment about his own role, saying, "According to the coaching staff, I probably shouldn't be playing much." That's basically what the message was. Though unrelated to the Warriors directly, it highlights a common theme across NBA locker rooms: the tension between self-belief and team dynamics. Players want to lead, coaches demand discipline, and finding that balance is what separates good teams from great ones. Back in San Francisco, however, the Warriors know their issue wasn't effort, it was execution. The numbers tell the story: an 11-point lead with just under 6 minutes remaining, evaporating in a flurry of missed shots, rushed possessions, and defensive lapses. Communication broke down at the worst possible time, and when that happens, even a championship-caliber roster can look ordinary. The Pacers simply stayed composed, took advantage of open looks, and punished every mistake. When the final buzzer sounded, there was no panic, just quiet frustration. The Warriors have been through worse, but they also understand the thin margin that separates early season stumbles from long-term problems. For Curry and Kerr, accountability wasn't about assigning blame. It was about setting a tone. The season is long, but habits form quickly, and if Golden State wants to rediscover its championship DNA, it must begin by closing games the way champions do, with focus, precision, and the refusal to let opportunities slip away again. The echoes of that defeat against the Pacers continued to resonate through the Warriors' locker room long after the final buzzer. In the quiet moments following the game, the frustration was almost tangible, not because of a lack of effort but because of how easily things fell apart. For a franchise that built its dynasty on discipline, rhythm, and trust, losing control of a game they were dominating felt like a punch to the gut. Steph Curry sat at his locker, towel over his head, replaying possessions in his mind, the missed passes, the rushed shots, the lack of ball movement. He wasn't angry at his teammates, but at the collective loss of identity that had cost them a winnable matchup. "We're better than this," he muttered softly, a sentence that summed up the mood of the entire roster. Steve Kerr entered the press room moments later, his expression a mixture of composure and irritation. Reporters knew that when Kerr looked that way, the post-game analysis was going to be blunt. "We played good basketball for 42 minutes, he began. "And then, for the last 6, we forgot who we are." The Warriors coach didn't point fingers, but his message was loud and clear. Mental lapses were destroying their consistency. It wasn't about one player or one play, it was about the inability to maintain focus as the pressure increased. Kerr's tone wasn't fiery but surgical. He spoke like a teacher disappointed in his best students for failing an exam they should have aced easily. Behind the scenes, the Warriors coaching staff had already started breaking down film. Every possession of the fourth quarter was scrutinized. Every miscommunication, every rotation missed by half a step, every offensive set that broke down too quickly. The numbers painted a painful picture. During that 21-5 Pacers run, Golden State shot just 2 of 10 from the field and committed 4 turnovers. What had been fluid basketball turned into isolation-heavy possessions, a style far removed from the pass-first system that defined their success. "When we stop moving the ball, we stop being us," assistant coach Kenny Atkinson remarked in the film room. "And when we stop being us, we stop winning." For Stephen Curry, self-reflection was second nature. The 4-time champion has seen it all: the peaks of dynasties, the valleys of injuries, and the constant evolution of the league around him. Yet even after more than a decade in the NBA, nights like this still sting. "Leadership isn't about talking," Curry said during practice the next day. "It's about showing up and setting the example, especially after losses like that." His words weren't loud, but everyone listened. Draymond Green nodded in agreement, his trademark intensity returning. Klay Thompson, quieter than usual, spent most of practice working on his shooting form, the rhythmic repetition of swishes filling the gym like a meditation mantra. It wasn't panic, it was recalibration. That recalibration extended beyond the veterans. Young players like Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody and Brandon Podziemski found themselves under the microscope. The coaching staff wanted them to understand what accountability truly meant. It wasn't just about hustle plays or scoring bursts, it was about understanding timing, positioning, and how small decisions could alter the flow of an entire game. Kerr and his assistants spent extra hours with the younger guys, breaking down scenarios, emphasizing the importance of communication, and teaching how to anticipate rather than react. For Golden State, development has always gone hand in hand with winning, but now those lessons carried extra urgency. Outside the locker room, media narratives began to swirl. Some questioned if the Warriors' dynasty core was finally aging out of contention. Others argued that it was too early in the season to panic, pointing out that the team had started slow in past years only to find its stride later. Still, the criticism had substance. The Warriors' execution late in games had been a recurring issue, not an isolated one. Analysts on national TV debated whether the Warriors needed to evolve stylistically or whether they simply needed to rediscover their mental edge. Curry's accountability was praised, but there was also an underlying challenge. Words were one thing, but could this team still translate experience into dominance when it mattered? Internally, Kerr knew the answer depended on reconnecting the team with its identity, movement, spacing, and trust. When we're at our best, he told his players during a film session, the ball doesn't stop. Everyone touches it, everyone's involved. That's what breaks defenses. He replayed clips from championship seasons, highlighting sequences where 5 players moved in harmony, passes zipping from one side to the other before an open three. The contrast with the Pacers game was glaring. Instead of fluidity, there was hesitation. Instead of confidence, uncertainty. The Warriors didn't need to reinvent themselves, they needed to remember who they were. As practice concluded, Curry stayed on the court, running drills with younger teammates. He encouraged them to stay vocal, to talk on defense, to trust the system even when shots weren't falling. It's not about being perfect, he said between breaths, it's about being connected. His energy was contagious. Within minutes, laughter returned to the gym. The loss still stung, but it no longer lingered like a wound, it had transformed into fuel. That's what great teams do, they turn frustration into focus. The road ahead wasn't going to get easier. The Warriors' next stretch of games included tough matchups against Western Conference contenders, and the margin for error was shrinking. But in the midst of doubt, there was also quiet confidence. Curry, Kerr, and the core of this dynasty had faced adversity before, and each time they had found a way to rise. The film sessions, the long practices, the honest conversations, they weren't signs of weakness but of hunger. The message was simple. Accountability had been acknowledged, lessons had been learned, and the only thing left was to respond the Warriors' way, with precision, pride, and a renewed commitment to the game that made them legends. The days following the loss to Indiana marked a subtle but significant shift inside the Warriors organization. While from the outside it looked like just another early season hiccup, within the walls of Chase Center, the team treated it as a wake-up call. Every great dynasty encounters a moment where it must re-establish its identity, where pride meets accountability. For Golden State, that moment arrived in early November. The frustration had been aired, the mistakes had been dissected, and now it was time to rebuild the rhythm that once made them untouchable. The mantra inside the locker room became simple but powerful: execute, trust, respond. These 3 words began appearing on whiteboards in film sessions, and even scribbled across players' shoes during practice. Steph Curry's leadership style transformed in the days after the loss. Normally known for his calm and measured demeanor, he began practicing with a different kind of intensity. He was talking more, pushing teammates harder, and setting the tone from the opening whistle of every drill. His voice carried through the gym like an anchor, steady but sharp. Lock in, he would shout after a sloppy pass. Move the ball, when the offense stalled. It wasn't anger, it was clarity. The message was unmistakable. Championship habits don't rebuild themselves. If the Warriors were going to contend again, every possession had to mean something. Curry wasn't just leading by example anymore. He was demanding accountability from everyone wearing the same jersey. Klay Thompson, the other half of the Splash Brothers, found himself navigating a personal crossroads. His shooting numbers early in the season had fluctuated, and with each miss came whispers about whether he could still deliver elite performances consistently. Yet Klay's response was quintessentially Thompson, quiet determination. He arrived early before practice, headphones on, blocking out the noise, and took hundreds of shots from every corner of the court. The rhythmic sound of the ball hitting the hardwood and swishing through the net echoed through the empty arena. When asked about the criticism, Klay's answer was simple: "You just keep shooting. That's who I am." It was a reminder that while systems and schemes matter, confidence remains the lifeblood of every great shooter. Draymond Green, the emotional compass of the Warriors, took a different route in handling the aftermath. Known for his fiery personality, Draymond turned his passion inward, focusing on structure and defense. "We can't outscore our problems anymore," he told reporters after practice. "We've got to defend. That's our backbone." His defensive communication during scrimmages became relentless, pointing, yelling, correcting positioning in real time. He knew that if the Warriors could rediscover their defensive identity, their offense would naturally follow. It was vintage Draymond, loud, intense, and utterly devoted to team chemistry. Even Curry admitted later that Draymond's renewed energy reignited something within the group that numbers alone couldn't quantify. Coach Steve Kerr, always the voice of perspective, decided to use the team's next film session not to criticize but to inspire. He showed highlights not just from their peak championship years but from moments when they had fought through adversity. Clips of Curry diving for loose balls, Klay defending bigger opponents, and bench players making hustle plays flashed across the screen. "This," Kerr said, pausing the footage, "is who we are. Not perfect, not invincible, but relentless." The room was silent, but everyone felt the weight of his words. It wasn't nostalgia. It was a reminder that greatness isn't built on talent alone but on consistency, trust, and resilience. Meanwhile, the younger players began absorbing those lessons with visible progress. Jonathan Kuminga, who had shown flashes of brilliance but struggled with decision-making, started focusing more on off-ball movement. Moses Moody worked tirelessly on defense, studying tape of Andre Iguodala to emulate his anticipation and timing. Brandon Podziemski, still fueled by his youthful confidence, brought an infectious energy to every practice. Kerr often smiled when watching him. It was that kind of exuberance that reminded the veterans of why they started playing in the first place. The mix of youth and experience was finally beginning to blend into something cohesive again. Outside the gym, the media continued to scrutinize every Warriors storyline. Talk shows debated whether Golden State's window was closing, while analysts broke down their shot charts like forensic investigators. But inside the organization there was no panic. The veterans had been through worse. They understood that the NBA season isn't a sprint but a marathon, and early struggles often serve as the fuel for later success. Curry even addressed this directly when speaking to reporters. "We've been doubted before. Every time people start writing us off, that's when we find another gear. So let them talk. We'll do the work." That work soon began to show results. Practices became sharper, rotations more precise, and the energy more unified. The Warriors' passing sequences began to flow again, that signature ballet of motion that leaves defenses dizzy. Ball movement returned to being poetry in motion. One touch to the wing, a swing pass to the corner, a backdoor cut, and suddenly an open three. Kerr's smile during scrimmages said it all. "That's Warriors basketball," he said proudly. The team could feel the shift, the return of trust, chemistry, and collective purpose. But Kerr knew the true test wouldn't come in practice. It would come under the lights, when the pressure was back on and the game tightened in the final minutes. Could they close this time? Could they stay calm when a lead began to shrink? Those were the questions that would define their next chapter. As the team boarded the plane for their upcoming road trip, the atmosphere was different, not tense but focused. Curry looked around the cabin at his teammates and smiled faintly. "We've been here before," he said quietly. "And every time we found our way back." It wasn't a motivational speech. It was a promise, one built on experience, on brotherhood, and on the unshakable belief that the Warriors' story was far from over. The Warriors' next stretch of games would test everything they had been rebuilding since the loss to Indiana. The schedule offered no mercy, back-to-back road matchups against high-caliber teams, each waiting for the chance to expose Golden State's recent vulnerabilities. Yet something felt different as the team took the floor. The energy was sharper, the communication clearer, and the collective confidence, though still fragile, began to solidify. Steph Curry led warm-ups with his usual blend of focus and joy, draining threes from every angle of the court. Klay Thompson joined in, smiling again, the two exchanging their signature pre-game ritual, a sign that the chemistry was returning not only on the floor but also in spirit. There was a quiet understanding among them. The only way out of the storm was through it. As the first game tipped off, the Warriors immediately showed signs of renewed purpose. Their passes were crisp, rotations precise, and the offense flowed like a well-rehearsed symphony. The ball zipped around the perimeter, creating open shots, and the bench players brought energy that mirrored the starters. Steve Kerr, pacing the sideline, could sense the momentum shifting. "That's it," he yelled during a timeout. "That's who we are." The Warriors' style, fast, selfless, relentless, had returned at least for the night. Curry orchestrated the attack, not just scoring but distributing, finding teammates in stride and trusting them to make the right play. It wasn't about individual brilliance, it was about reclaiming their identity. Draymond Green's defensive instincts were once again on full display. He barked out switches, anticipated passes, and physically set the tone. Every loose ball seemed to gravitate toward him. When asked after the game about his energy, Draymond smirked, "That's what I do. I make sure we talk, we move, we believe." His fire was contagious. Jonathan Kuminga fed off that intensity, crashing the boards and running the floor with authority. Moses Moody nailed key corner threes, while Dario Saric brought toughness in the paint. The Warriors didn't just win, they dominated through execution, turning what had once been frustration into precision. For the first time in weeks, they looked like themselves again. After the game, the locker room was electric. Laughter filled the air, the kind that only comes after hard-earned redemption. But amidst the celebration, Curry's words grounded everyone. "Enjoy this," he said, "but remember why it worked. We trusted each other." Those simple words carried more weight than any highlight or stat line. The Warriors had rediscovered the essence of their basketball philosophy, connection. Kerr reinforced that message during his post-game press conference, praising his team's balance and composure. "We were connected tonight," he said proudly. "That's the difference between winning and losing in this league." His statement wasn't just for the reporters. It was for his players, a public acknowledgement that the process was paying off. Yet as all season teams know, the NBA is relentless. Just 2 nights later, the Warriors faced another test, a grueling overtime battle against a defensive juggernaut. It wasn't pretty. The shots didn't fall as easily and fatigue began to creep in. But unlike in Indiana, they didn't fold. Curry's leadership shone brightest in the chaos. When the team trailed by 5 with 2 minutes remaining, he called for calm. "We've been here before," he told his teammates in the huddle. "Stay poised, stay connected." Then he did what leaders do, he delivered. A step-back 3 from deep, a no-look assist to Klay, and a defensive rebound that sealed the victory. The Warriors escaped with a win, not because of flawless execution, but because of their renewed belief in each other. The post-game scene was telling. Curry and Kerr exchanged a subtle nod. No need for celebration, just mutual respect. They both knew what these wins meant, progress. The locker room vibe was steady, focused, with less noise and more purpose. Klay, when asked about his improved rhythm, simply said, "Patience and trust. The game always rewards that." Draymond chimed in, "It's about holding each other accountable. We don't let the little things slide anymore." The quotes might have sounded cliché to outsiders, but to those inside the locker room, they represented transformation. Golden State was rediscovering its championship DNA not through dominance, but through discipline. Meanwhile, the younger players were gaining valuable experience in real time. Podziemski's confidence continued to grow, and Kerr started trusting him in key minutes. His hustle plays, diving for loose balls, taking charges, keeping possessions alive, were the kind of small details that win big games. Kuminga's athleticism added energy to every rotation, while Moody's calm decision-making provided balance. The veterans noticed. "They're learning fast," said Clay after one game. "That's how dynasties stay alive, when the next generation starts carrying the torch." It was clear that the Warriors' evolution was now a blend of old wisdom and new fire. However, not everything was perfect. Kerr continued to emphasize that consistency was still the missing piece. During one intense film session, he stopped the tape mid-play and looked around the room. "This," he said, pointing to a defensive miscommunication, "is what separates good teams from great ones. We can't relax." No one spoke. Everyone understood the message. The Warriors had found momentum, but maintaining it would require vigilance. The NBA's margin for error is razor thin. One lapse, one lazy rotation, one careless turnover, and the entire rhythm collapses. Curry knew it too. "Every possession matters," he reminded the group. "Every single one." By the end of that week, Golden State had strung together a series of wins, climbing back into the Western Conference conversation. The early panic from fans and analysts began to fade. What replaced it was a cautious optimism, the sense that maybe, just maybe, the Warriors had found their balance again. Curry's leadership, Clay's resilience, Draymond's fire, Kerr's vision, and the youthful hunger of the new core were finally aligning. But the season was still young and the real tests, the kind that define legacies, were still ahead. For now, the Warriors had reclaimed their identity, rebuilt their trust, and reignited the flame that had once set the basketball world on fire. And as they prepared for the next challenge, there was no question left in anyone's mind. The dynasty wasn't dead. It was just waking up. As the echoes of defeat faded within the halls of Chase Center, Stephen Curry found himself standing at the heart of another moment of reckoning. Leadership in the NBA is not a title. It's a burden carried by those who refuse to deflect blame when things crumble. Curry, as usual, wore that crown without flinching. After the loss to the Pacers, he didn't point fingers, didn't mention the missed assignments or the cold shooting streaks from teammates. Instead, he looked straight into the cameras and spoke words that only true captains of the game understand. "This one's on me. I need to close that game better." That single line hit with the weight of his legacy, because when Steph takes responsibility, it resonates far beyond the locker room. It sets the tone for every player wearing blue and gold, reminding them that accountability is what separates contenders from pretenders. But behind his calm expression was a storm. Curry knows the fine line between leadership and self-destruction. Taking the blame is noble, but too much of it corrodes confidence. Yet, that's who Steph is, the silent fire that holds his teammates accountable by holding himself accountable first. During team meetings, he's known to speak less but mean more. "We lost our focus," he reportedly told them, "and that starts with me." The Pacers' fourth-quarter surge wasn't just a basketball collapse. It was a mental one, the kind that infects a locker room if not confronted immediately. And that's where Curry's leadership becomes crucial, not because he shouts, but because his humility commands respect. He doesn't demand perfection, but he embodies effort. Draymond Green, often the emotional barometer of the team, nodded in agreement when asked about Curry's remarks. "That's what makes him who he is," Green said. "He never hides from the moment." Green's own fire had boiled over in the game, drawing a technical foul in frustration as the Pacers drained another dagger three. Yet after the loss, even he dialed it back, following Curry's example of composure. The locker room, once buzzing with frustration, settled into a quiet unity. They weren't happy, but they were aligned. It's a dynamic forged over years of championship battles, where accountability is the only constant amid chaos. And for a team struggling to rediscover its killer instinct, that unity might be the spark they desperately need. Meanwhile, head coach Steve Kerr faced his own wave of criticism. Some questioned his late-game rotations, especially leaving rookie Brandon Podziemski on the floor during key possessions. Kerr, though, defended the choice, emphasizing development and trust. But even he admitted that the loss stung more than most. "We've got to finish better. We know that. We let one slip," Kerr said post-game. And once again, Curry's leadership was central to the recovery process. Kerr often refers to Steph as the soul of the team, a description that perfectly encapsulates his influence. Because even when his shots aren't falling, his belief never wavers, and that faith radiates through the roster. The Warriors' locker room dynamic has evolved dramatically from their dynasty days. Back then, winning masked flaws. Now, each loss exposes cracks that demand immediate repair. Curry's voice is the glue holding it all together. Younger players like Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody watch closely, absorbing not just his skill but his demeanor. They see how he handles adversity, how he addresses mistakes without drama, and how he turns criticism into fuel. It's mentorship by example, a masterclass in emotional intelligence that could define the next era of Warriors basketball. And that's precisely what this team needs in its transition from dominance to reinvention. Still, the frustration lingers. Golden State's fourth-quarter struggles have become a recurring theme this season, echoing the same patterns that plagued them last year. Turnovers, rushed shots, defensive lapses. It's a cycle that keeps replaying. But every cycle can be broken, and Curry seems determined to do just that. He's no stranger to adversity. From being doubted as a college prospect to transforming the entire geometry of basketball, his career is built on rewriting narratives. And right now, the narrative of the Warriors' inconsistency is one he refuses to accept. His message to the team was clear: this loss hurts, but it's not final. The response will define them more than the defeat itself. In the days that followed, practices grew more intense. Curry led drills with extra focus, shouting encouragements, demanding precision. The coaching staff noticed a shift, not one of panic, but of purpose. Veterans responded, and even the bench players started to feel that urgency. A sense of identity was slowly being reforged, not around flashy highlights, but around discipline and execution. That's what makes Curry's leadership different. He doesn't rebuild teams through speeches. He does it through example, through consistency, through his refusal to settle. As the Warriors prepared for their next matchup, there was no panic, only determination. The sting of the Pacers' loss still lingered, but it had transformed into motivation. Every great team faces its share of collapses. What defines them is how they respond. And as long as Curry keeps shouldering the weight of leadership with humility and fire, Golden State will never truly be out of the fight. The crown he wears is heavy, yes, but it's made of resilience, and that's what makes him not just a star, but a legend in motion. The Warriors' defeat against the Pacers wasn't just another regular season stumble. It was a reflection of deeper structural issues that have quietly lingered beneath the surface for months. Every team goes through bad nights, but this one felt different. Golden State had full control, leading by double digits deep into the fourth quarter, before the rhythm of the game slipped through their fingers like sand. The collapse wasn't caused by a single mistake. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Missed box-outs, poor rotations, careless turnovers, and defensive miscommunications all merged into one catastrophic sequence. The Pacers didn't steal the win. The Warriors handed it away, possession by possession. For a franchise built on precision and rhythm, watching their composure evaporate in real time was painful. The sequence began innocently enough: an unforced turnover by Chris Paul, followed by a quick three from Tyrese Halliburton. Then came another empty possession, another defensive lapse, and suddenly the energy shifted. The Warriors' offense, once fluid, became stagnant. Ball movement stopped, shots grew forced, and Curry, despite his brilliance, found himself trapped in a web of double teams. Golden State's once feared small ball lineup looked slow, disconnected, and uncertain. Each Pacers basket felt heavier than the last, each Warriors miss more deflating. By the time the clock hit its final minutes, the game's momentum was irreversibly gone. That's how quickly things fall apart in the NBA. One mistake leads to doubt, and doubt leads to disaster. Steve Kerr later admitted that the Warriors lost discipline. He wasn't wrong. For years, their dynasty thrived on collective trust. Trust in the system, in the pass, in the shot. But lately that trust has wavered. Too many possessions end with isolation plays, too many defensive switches are mistimed, and too often, the team relies on Curry's heroics to save them. It's a dangerous habit. Basketball, at its core, is about rhythm and cohesion, and when either breaks, the whole structure crumbles. That's exactly what happened against Indiana. The Pacers played fearless basketball, attacking mismatches, spreading the floor and punishing every lazy rotation. The Warriors, in contrast, looked like a team fighting ghosts, haunted by the shadow of what they used to be. But the story of this collapse isn't purely negative, it's also revealing. It exposed where the Warriors truly stand in this new chapter of their evolution. The dynasty era was defined by unshakable chemistry and youthful energy. Now they are an older, more methodical group navigating a league that has adapted to their once revolutionary style. The very playbook they invented has become standard across the NBA, meaning their margin for error is thinner than ever. Every turnover becomes a fast break, every missed rotation, a highlight for the opposition. That's the cost of setting the standard. Everyone learns from you, then uses your own blueprint against you. Inside the locker room, there was no shouting match or dramatic finger-pointing. The silence after the Pacers game said everything. Players sat with towels over their heads, staring into the distance. Draymond Green's voice, usually booming, was quiet. Klay Thompson leaned back against his locker, replaying shots he'd missed in his head. Even the younger players, like Jonathan Kuminga, could feel the weight of the moment. Curry broke the silence with calm words, not anger. "We know who we are," he said. "But we've got to play like it again." It wasn't a speech, it was a reminder. For a team with 4 championships, greatness isn't forgotten overnight, but it does require reawakening. Statistically, the game was a microcosm of the Warriors' biggest weakness this season: late-game execution. They rank among the bottom teams in clutch turnovers, a sign that pressure moments are no longer their strong suit. The crisp, intuitive play that once defined Warriors basketball now comes in flashes rather than full quarters. Analysts have pointed out fatigue as a factor. Curry and Thompson are deep into their 30s, and their minutes still remain heavy. But fatigue doesn't explain miscommunication or the lack of urgency on defense. That comes from mentality, from hunger, from rediscovering the edge that once made them feared. One could argue that this loss might be exactly what the Warriors needed. Sometimes collapse breeds clarity. The film sessions that followed the defeat were intense, dissecting every blown rotation and every rushed shot. Kerr emphasized fundamentals: boxing out, moving without the ball, and trusting the next pass. "We don't need miracles," he told them. "We just need discipline." And that's true. For all their talent, the Warriors don't win through individual brilliance alone. They win through rhythm, tempo, and synchronization. When that breaks, they look ordinary. When it clicks, they look unstoppable. The Pacers game was a painful reminder of that fragile balance. Fans too felt the sting. Social media erupted with frustration, calling for changes, questioning rotations, even doubting the dynasty's survival. But those who truly understand this team know that their story isn't over. Every era faces its test, and this is theirs. Can the Warriors evolve once more, adapt to a faster, younger league, and rediscover their identity? It won't happen overnight, but they've overcome worse before. The loss to Indiana will be remembered not for the defeat itself, but for what it exposed: the urgency of transformation. Because if there's one thing the Warriors have always done best, it's rewriting their story when everyone else starts writing their obituary. For the Golden State Warriors, every loss carries a heavier meaning than it does for most teams. They're not just another franchise chasing wins, they're a dynasty fighting against time itself. The collapse against the Pacers didn't just sting because it added another number to the loss column. It hurt because it highlighted how fragile dominance can be when the smallest details are ignored. The Warriors' core, Curry, Thompson, Green, has built one of the most admired empires in modern sports, but with that comes a unique kind of pressure. Every misstep, every defeat, is magnified through the lens of what they once were. The basketball world doesn't judge them by ordinary standards anymore. They're expected to be brilliant every night, to execute flawlessly, and to play with the same hunger that once propelled them to immortality. But as Saturday night showed, even legends can falter. Steph Curry's willingness to take responsibility after the game wasn't just leadership. It was the behavior of a man aware of the shadow he stands under. He knows that his words carry the weight of a dynasty. When he says, "I made it harder for us offensively," he's not making excuses. He's acknowledging that accountability starts at the top. And that's what separates Curry from most superstars. He doesn't hide when the lights are harshest. Still, his shoulders can only carry so much. The Warriors' success was never built on one man. It thrived because of unity, trust, and system. Now, that chemistry feels tested in ways it never was before. The connection that once seemed telepathic between Curry and Thompson looks a step slower. The defensive communication anchored by Draymond Green wavers at times. It's not that they've forgotten how to play together. It's that time has dulled the edges of their once perfect synchrony. Steve Kerr's voice remains steady, but even he knows the challenge is evolving. His system revolutionized basketball, yet that same system now struggles against the pace and athleticism of today's league. Teams that once studied Golden State's movement patterns have mastered and mirrored them. The space and pace game that once felt revolutionary is now standard across the NBA. The Warriors are being forced to adapt to a style they themselves created. That irony isn't lost on Kerr. After the Pacers game, he talked about execution, but between the lines, his message was deeper. It was about identity. The Warriors can't win by chasing their past. They have to redefine who they are now. That begins with the small things. Rebounding better, valuing possessions, defending without fouling. Those aren't glamorous fixes, but they're essential ones. The locker room dynamics are shifting too. The younger players, Kuminga, Moody, Podziemski, are eager to prove themselves but still adjusting to the Warriors' demanding culture. They weren't part of the early championship years, so the pressure to uphold that legacy can be overwhelming. When Curry or Green speaks, they listen, but living up to the golden standard is easier said than done. Veterans, meanwhile, are learning to balance mentorship with their own pursuit of consistency. Klay Thompson's journey is the most emotional example. Once one of the league's deadliest shooters, he now faces questions about his rhythm and longevity. Yet his resilience remains unmatched. Every time he hits a big shot, Chase Center erupts, not just in celebration but in collective hope, that the old Klay might still be there, waiting to re-emerge when it matters most. Outside the team, the narrative grows louder. Analysts speculate whether this is the beginning of the end. Social media debates whether Golden State's window is closing. But inside the organization there's still belief. The front office trusts in the core, understanding that while time may take away athleticism, it doesn't erase championship DNA. What they need now isn't a reinvention of their identity, it's a recalibration of focus. The Warriors have survived worse storms: Durant's departure, injuries to stars, and the painful seasons that followed. Each time they found a way back. And Curry, even in his mid-30s, still plays with the joy of a kid chasing something new, not a veteran clinging to what was. That joy, the spark behind every shot, every grin, is still the heartbeat of this team. On the court, the Warriors' blueprint for recovery remains simple but demanding. Trust the pass, stay connected on defense, and play with pace and purpose. Those principles sound basic, yet they've defined the franchise's success for nearly a decade. What made Golden State great wasn't just shooting, it was intelligence. They outthought their opponents as much as they outshot them. The Pacers' game proved that when their thinking slows down, their entire rhythm collapses. So now the challenge isn't physical, it's mental. Can they summon the same sharpness, the same attention to detail, that made them unstoppable? The answer lies not in highlight reels but in film sessions, sweat, and humility. And perhaps that's the most compelling part of their story, the fight to evolve. Dynasties rarely fade quietly, they either crumble or transform. The Warriors have the choice to do the latter. Their legacy isn't just about banners hanging from the rafters. It's about resilience. The Pacers' loss, frustrating as it was, might serve as a reminder of why they've endured longer than anyone thought possible. Every championship run began with a moment like this. A night where everything went wrong and they chose to respond. The Warriors have built their empire on comebacks. And if history has taught us anything, it's that whenever you count them out, that's usually when they remind the world who they are.